I did a piece of like I had a sketch in my sketchbook of the Three Stooges, like all sort of like in this sort of like beating on each other or whatever. And he comes over to me and he goes, "Man, I'd see that in a mall kiosk." And I was like, "Oh man, it's such a blow to the ego." And and so he like looked through my sketchbook and he saw this like weird monster, and he's like, "Why don't you do that?" Because the monster was like smoking a cigarette, and I was like, "I can do that." And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "This is what I want you to do. This is what you obviously enjoy doing." So he's like, so from that point, like that one critique, that like humiliating moment was such a cool like this like spark, like aha, like okay, like I can actually do what I want to do. And so
Hey, how's it going? You are here for Heavy Art Talk. As usual, it's your host, Lee. Today, I have Brendon Flynn joining me. This is going to be a really fun conversation. Brendon is a songwriter, guitarist, as well as an illustrator, so we're going to be able to cover all the usual ground. Some of the music projects that he works on would be Diagonal Path, Idle Engine, and oh my god, I wrote it down, but I can't read my own writing. He'll tell me when he comes on. I'm an idiot. I'm sorry. But illustration-wise, he's worked with bands like Replacire, Earth Crisis, Freya, Red Chord, Amorphis, and Wilderun. Without further ado, Brendon, what did I mess up?
well, Sane Gods.
And then I thought it said sane, but I was like, did he say sane? So yeah, I messed that up. Sorry about that.
That's all right. And then I used to play in Freya too, so.
Sick, man.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very excited. This should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What have you been listening to lately?
That's a big question. Well, I just was listening to the new Hot Water music, new Leprous. Actually, Snarky Puppy re-released a remix of one of their albums, so listen to that. But yeah.
Nice, man. So you're kind of bouncing around a little bit.
Yeah.
Hot Water music, is that like jazz fusion, or am I getting mixed up?
No, that's like thrice kind of probably like they started in the 90s, like more of that post-hardcore type thing.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
And Snarky Puppy, I've seen them live, and they're I don't know what genre you call it, but it's instrumental, jazz based.
It's probably fusion, I guess.
Fusion, yeah.
Yeah.
They always have the best drummers, man.
Oh yeah, Larnell.
Like Larnell Lewis, yeah.
Yeah.
Killer player.
So good. Yeah. Another great record, a good callback. Burnt by the Sun. That's a good go-to for the gym, or just it's awesome.
Nice, man. So how did you kind of like fall in love with like heavier music? Like, what did that look like when you were younger?
I think it started sort of more of the punk rock sort of stuff when I was in middle school, and then I found Iron Maiden and Judas Priest, and then I think In Flames Clayman was like one of the first sort of like more death metal albums. Also, Testament to the Gathering too.
Oh, nice.
And then from there, because that was probably the late 90s with Testament, but then like 2000, I think, was when Clayman came out. And from there, I didn't have a computer or internet, so I had to buy CDs and then look in the liner notes on who they thanked. And then I'd find bands that way. So like Opeth and The Haunted and Arch Enemy.
That was the whole thing. It was like, what T-shirts are they wearing in the press photos, and then
totally.
Who do they put in the thank you notes?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, man. Have you been digging the new Opeth album?
I have. I think it's growing on me, but I miss the big riffs from like the first few albums. There's a lot to chew on, for sure.
Yeah, it's all over the place. There's so many transitions in the new one. It's kind of like you're perpetually bombarded with really well done, but a lot of transitions.
Yeah, it's very well done, but I miss I'm sure everyone probably feels that way to a certain extent, but I don't know.
Yeah. Do you have
It's
a
fine.
favorite Opeth record?
I think Blackwater Park, My Arms Your Hearse. That was the first album I heard by them. Um, Watershed. Yeah.
Yeah. Watershed's kind of underrated too. For some reason, like a lot of their music, it kind of has a, I don't know, it feels like a soundtrack to me to like a movie that's never been done. And like Watershed for me is like a desert, like Lawrence of Arabia type setting for some reason.
Sure. I can see that.
Yeah.
Well, Ghost Reveries too. That record's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ghost Reveries is kind of how I fell in love with them. Cause I was in high school when that came out. I remember, somebody on the iPad videos, man, or iPod videos. And like looking back, it's like, I think about that age, but with the current technology and like the resolution. But an iPad video is like it was like this small. But I remember seeing that video. I'm like, is this like Batman like holding the guy? Have you seen that video recently?
No, I haven't.
It's kind of weird, but like, dang, what a good song, Grand Conjuration, man.
Yeah. No, sure. What about you? What are you listening to?
New Opeth. I mean, I really like it. It's a good. I'm a big like 70s prog fan, but I like that they're like kind of in a new chapter, or at least I hope it's like a new chapter for stuff. It seems like every time they change their drummer, it's a new chapter. You know?
Right. Yeah, that's true. But what Martin Axelrod or whatever his name is, like he was there for a long time, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Because
I
Ghost
think
Reveries probably, right?
No, that was was his last name Lopez. I'll put a
Oh yeah,
detail.
Yep.
He was through Ghost Reveries, and I think Axelrod's first album might have been Watershed, or it was Heritage. I'll have to do fact checking after, but he's definitely got more of like a jazzy, kind of like looser style. Like at the end of the day, the drummer who I believe Lopez was on Blackwater Park, Ghost Reveries. I mean, like he knew how to fall in line with those really good melodies and those really good guitar parts. Like,
Yeah.
I think he was probably their best fit, but in terms of technical playing, the guy they have now might be the best. I don't know. He's like a young kid, like savant player, but he's good.
I think he's 30, so he's not too young.
Well, he got a little bit of a baby face. I'm sorry, man. You're an amazing player. For some random reason, you're watching an art podcast. Yeah, I liked watching his playthrough of the third track on the album.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for like you said, the new chapter or whatever. It's gonna be good.
Listen to like neo folk too.
Oh yeah,
I don't know if that's like up your alley, but for some reason it's just been the right mood for the last couple of days. Like current 93 kind of stuff. Some of like the more like pastoral sounding Swans albums.
Okay.
Been hitting like White Light, Mouth Infinity. Like that's kind of the vibe I'm in right now.
That's awesome. I have a hard time with genres. There's so much gray area. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I either like it or I don't. That's pretty much how I follow
So with the music projects you have, so it's Diagonal Path, Saint Gods, and Idle Engine. Are they all like achieving different things, or is it different people that make it up and then it just naturally feels different?
So Diagonal Path started as just a project. Like I left Freya and I just kind of wanted to have a project where whatever I'm feeling in the moment, it would just, that's what it would become. With like, but I think that album has become more, or that band has become more of the metal project, I guess. And so I write all the songs, guitar, bass, and then I'll hire a drummer. So the first two albums I had Bård Kolstad from Leprous. And then I'll also, like, I'm not a big solo player. I'm more of a rhythm songwriter kind of guy. So I have some guest solos on all the albums, which has been really cool. And so I'll reach out to people that either like I'm a fan of that were influential on me, like from the metal area, or I'll reach out to people that aren't. So like Mark Lettieri from Snarky Puppy does a solo on the new album that's just going to be released this coming year. But I worked with like Peter Witchers from Soilwork or ex Soilwork, and Wes Hauk from Alluvial, and wasn't he in? What else was he in?
I don't know.
I
Not
can't
off the top
remember.
of my head.
Anyway, but yeah, so it's been really really fun. And then Same Gods was actually a project that I started with a few friends before COVID, and that's more of like a ode to early '90s post-hardcore grunge type, like Cave In, Helmet, Deftones, that kind of stuff. But then COVID happened, and both the guys that were in the band had kids, and so that band's kind of on hiatus for the moment. And then Idle Engine is me doing guitar, bass, and singing, and then I have Kelly Scott from Failure doing the drums on that project. So,
Nice.
And that's more of that like rock, sort of like textural, like American football type kind of thing.
Okay, got it.
Some
Cool, man.
Thrice-y stuff going on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard for me to comprehend like being in multiple bands, being one of the main writers in 2 active bands, and then also like doing some pretty killer like painting and like illustration works. Like for me, it was like I'm kind of doing one or the other very seriously at one time. It's very hard for me to do like both at the level that I want. But it seems like from the outside, of course, you probably are critical of yourself, as most artists are. But it seems
Very
like
much.
you're executing at a very high level at both things. I mean, the Diagonal Path EP that you sent was like extremely well written. You know, it's very
Thanks,
cool.
man. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's weird. Like the music, I kind of have left the idea that it's going to make any money for me. So it's more of just a hobby, a passion thing that like it's a good outlet.
Yeah.
And so I compartmentalize art as still like a job. And I do leave time to have some personal projects with my painting and drawing. But if I have a gig, if I'm hired to do something, it makes it much easier to kind of like just put my head down and finish it if I have a deadline. But and if I am working on music, I don't know how you are when you're with your projects, but like I have a really hard time putting them down or like moving. I can't juggle too many things at once. So I want to complete something first before I move on.
Yeah.
But I can always find time to write a song or to do a painting at the same time. So,
And that, I'll just say, call it like being obsessed about the current piece right in front of you. Is that applicable to both visual art and music? Like you're kind of like completely focused and like zeroed in on the two.
yeah, for sure. I'll be sort of obsessive about, especially when it comes to a song. Like I can't sleep sometimes, or like if I'm at work, like it does. If I'm at the bar doing my quote unquote day job, like trying to go from that art space in my brain and shift gears to like, talking to people at the bar is very difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So very, very different sort of, I don't know, different part of the brain I'm using, I guess, but.
Oh, I'm the same way, man. I get, I mean, it's mostly with like my partner, but like she'll know when I'm ruminating and thinking about the art piece and not, engaged in conversation. That would be a common criticism, not airing out any, relationship woes, but like that it's hard for me to do the same thing. My mind, it's like it has to fix the visual problem in my case. So I can definitely relate, man.
Yeah, I think I will say though, when it comes to the art, and I don't know why this is, but when I was in art school, I learned to take breaks and to like sort of appreciate the time away, because I feel like that's when you come back, you notice when mistakes when they pop out. And same thing with songwriting too. Like it might be sucked into an idea and you're really hyped on maybe a chord progression or a lead line, but then you come back to it and you're like, that was so stupid. Like you just like stuff pops out at you more with a clear, fresh eye or ear,
Definitely.
So I do. It's sort of like a double-edged sword, like you don't want to leave the project, but it actually is helpful.
Yeah, 100%. I was beating myself up yesterday. I put a lot of hours into a piece and just getting super tunnel vision on it. And the piece I'm working on also is like, it lends itself to tunnel vision. But man, it was like kicking my ass yesterday. And then today with fresh pair of eyes, I was like, you know what? I just need to leave that section alone and move on. Sometimes it's like I have enough experience to know the pitfalls and like, you got to remember to look at the bigger picture, but I still fall into them. It's just like I'm just smarter now. You know what I mean? It's interesting. Yeah. It's not like I'm like blindly making mistakes. So
I feel like almost any artist I talk to, any creator in general, I feel like we're always taking like 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Like, you have to practice. I'm constantly like learning and relearning, things when it comes to drawing or color palette or, like I think, I don't know about you, but I have like when I put my paints out in my palette, or even when I'm songwriting, like I have the things I go to tried and true, like chord shapes or color combinations that I know work.
Yeah.
But like, it's good to, but there are some things that I always have to relearn, whether it be like, I'm trying to think of an example, light and shadow and what like the temperature of a certain color in a certain environment or certain anatomy. Like I can never remember like forearms for whatever reason. I don't know. Like that's such a weird small example, but
they are interesting things, man, because like they kind of like wrap around a little bit, in terms of some of those muscles.
Right.
I'll look at like a Hogarth book, and then I'll like subtract a couple things because he kind of embellishes it a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. Do you have any favorite artists that you go to for reference or for inspiration consistently?
Future Lee here. I'm doing some editing. I realize I don't really answer his question very directly, but I think it leads to some interesting conversation. So
I'm trying to do 2 things at the same time right now in my practice. I feel like I'm on a good trajectory of focus, like doing a consistent body of work so people know what they can expect to get out of me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like maybe 2 years ago I was very much experimenting,
Yeah.
I kind of had like a voice, but like it was maybe too broad. That's another trap that I think I find myself in, is like I'll go to artists that I really love their style, and I don't expect them to be really good at a lot of things. I expect them to be really good at what they do. And it's like, why am I not like that with myself? Why do I feel like I have to be good at a lot of different things? So I'm trying to actually just subtract, like just focus for the moment. And then when I get bored with that, maybe branch out. But at the same time, I don't want my work to necessarily look like other people's. So I want to focus on pen and ink illustration, but I want to keep looking at artists who aren't in that medium, so I don't end up looking too much like somebody else. That's at the end of the day, though, I'm drawing in so many different things that are inspiring me that I'm not like actively like focused on that. Like I don't get called a copycat.
Sure.
Well, I don't think I ever have, but
that's
maybe
awesome.
People start now. I don't know, but I don't know, man. I mean, there's this guy I've talked about him before. His work just looks like magic. Actually, I'll mention this other one. So, do you know who Alex Nino is?
This name sounds familiar, but
he's a Filipino artist. He's getting up there in age now, but he did a lot of really cool comic book illustration stuff in the 70s and 80s. But he's been consistently working. But I just bought 2 originals of his. I got them right over there. And awesome. It's like you look up close and you're just like, everything's so gestural, and I want to call it messy, but like there's a chaos to it. But then you look, at the end of my room, and it's like the most tidy thing ever. It's like magic. I'll have to share it on my Instagram, but like my work is oftentimes so hyper detailed and intricate, and that's how people usually describe my stuff. But then this, it's just full of energy, and it still has a lot of structure, but it's like also chaotic at the same time. I don't know. It's mind-blowing stuff. I'll probably put something in post, but I've also found getting original work whenever you can afford it makes it real. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm very lucky. I got a Tyler Pennington original, Creep from 6 Feet Deep, and like I'm looking at it right now, and it's like, first of all, anyone who's seen it has been like, that's a print, right? Like it was made way bigger. I'm like, no, that is the original. I'm like, it's mind blowing, man. So that's a big rant. Maybe I'm just on a rant today, but I try to pull from so many different styles. Like I'm very impressed by people with loose styles, and I'm very impressed by people with tight kind of styles, just to kind of categorize. And I want to not lose sight of that looseness as I keep trying to up my own personal Andy. But that's my rant, man. Where's your thought process with your art practice right now? Like, what are you juggling?
Well, just like you, I'm never satisfied. The grass is always greener. Like I have tendencies to get really tight and detailed. Yeah. I definitely want to bring in some looseness, and that could be just maybe in the backgrounds or in elements outside the focal point. But at the same time I do love just like carving away and just, just getting in there and making a lot of, just creating lots of shape and color, and it's just fun. That's how I naturally like to make marks, like just small. That's how I draw with a pen, the pencil. But like I think of some of the artists that I really like, and again, they're all over the place. So like I love John Singer Sargent and Ilya Repin from like the realist movement. I'm a huge fan of like pretty much all of the Wyeth family. So, NC, Jamie, or Andrew and Jamie, like that sort of school, the Brandywine school of painters. So like Howard Pyle too. Yeah. Just that golden age of illustration, like with Norman Rockwell and Maxfield Parrish. But then I like some more modern guys like Mike Mignola, or I don't know if you know Baron Story.
Baron Story is awesome, man. Yeah. There's
Sergio
not a good
Topi.
art book of his shit though, man.
True. Right.
Yeah.
I know. It's a good point. Sergio Topi, I think he's passed, but he was an Italian comic illustrator. For a pen and ink person, you definitely should check him out if you don't know him. Heinrich Clay. I don't know if you know his work. I highly recommend.
There's like a $20 book I got off Amazon, and anyone who wants to just get better at sketching, just do some studies. Just literally reproduce some of the shit in there, and you'll already start to see that your work will get better.
Was it one of his sketchbooks?
Yeah, it's like a collection of. It's weird. I'm going to describe it. I'll put it up, but this is going to sound random. You ever seen like the original poster for The Lion King on Broadway? For some reason, the text or the font they used looks like that. So when I bought it, I was like, that's kind of weird. It might be a random thing, but like, it's like a yellow-orange book. I got off Amazon for $20, and it's one of my favorite art books. It's bang for your buck, one of the good ones,
Does it? I'm like, is it drawings by Heinrich Clay?
Yeah, because
there's another one. There's a red one. It's more drawings.
It's red or orange. I don't remember.
No. There's two of them. There's two books. They're both great.
Do you own them?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, Heinrich Clay's great.
And then I look at all these artists just for inspiration, for whether it be just how they draw something, whether it be a person or an animal or a scene. But then there's artists I look for composition. So like Dave McKean, I love his work. And also and Mike Mignola, I think his compositions are incredible. Alphonse Mucha.
Lion Decker.
Yeah.
Or he thinks like a designer, like I like that.
But at the same time, like to what you were saying about like sort of focusing your portfolio, and I think that's a very smart thing to do. And I always thought about like if I were to teach a class, like I don't know where I'd start, but I do think that the one thing I wish that like my professors would have told me in art school was like, style will come. Like just make as much art as you possibly can, and it'll just come. Like you have no choice. Like it's just gonna, unless you're actively trying to copy somebody else. Like I feel like if you just make art, like it'll start to hone itself in, And also if you look at any artist, I feel like if you look at the beginning of their career to the end of their career or later in their career, like it does shift,
Yeah. Sienkiewicz was big like that. I don't know if you're a fan of his work, comic book illustrator Bill Sienkiewicz, but he did
sure.
a lot of his early stuff looked like Neil Adams, but then he completely shifted. And I think he might have studied under Baron Story, but he's like from that kind of like school of thinking, because Baron Story, he has a little bit of an out of the box approach. You know what I mean? I've heard a lot of people that, because he's a professor or was a professor, and I think he made a big impression on a lot of artists, like just kind of shifted their thinking a bit from some of the conventional ways.
So I guess to answer your original question, lately, I think I've been trying to just come up with some, I don't know, just some, I want to simplify the backgrounds. Maybe sort of, I've been really inspired by some like Japanese prints where it's like almost like layers of almost like a lithograph print or something, where like you have just like that simplified, more animation style background, and then have more of a detailed foreground, and play around with where that would take me. I don't know what, but that's kind of what I want to do.
Is that something you perceive as a weakness with your current work, or just a different direction?
Just a different direction. Yeah. I mean, I've been enjoying also just drawing, like doing ballpoint pen portraits, just as an exercise, and trying to simplify too. Like just, I feel like, especially in metal right now, and this is my own taste. It's not a critique, but I feel like people love detail, like a lot of detail, and I feel like what some artists I've noticed sort of lack a silhouette. Like they lack a good silhouette. Like there's so much going on. And if you zoom in on a portion, it's really cool. But when you zoom out, like I don't know what's going on. It's kind of confusing. And so I like, whenever I do a design, and this also is my own taste. So again, take it with a grain of salt, but like I want it to read. So if you have a little icon on iTunes, I want to make sure that like you can at least, there's something that attracts you to it,
Yeah.
It's just not a confusing mess of lines.
No, I'm with you. What's interesting about metal art in general is this is an oversimplification, and anyone listening, try not to analyze yourself too much in this, but think about the history to it. This is just, once again, my viewpoint, but especially at the beginning, there were so many album covers that were just done by metalheads who dabbled in art. It's like the metalhead was first, and then eventually artists commissioned by metalheads. So they might like metal, but like, I don't know, they know who the fuck NC Wyeth is. You know what I mean? Like that's what I mean. So like there's like this charm to like those demo covers where they're done in somewhat of like an ignorant fashion. And like, once you train in art, you can't really go back to like being an ignorant artist. Like I look at some of my early stuff when I wasn't really absorbing that many outside influences, or like trying to like intentionally get better. And like, there's a weirdness to them that I kind of like, but it's just the journey and the progression. So I don't know. It's just an observation from the outside looking in. And there's a lot of metal fans, because I'm a part of like the record collector community. They love that stuff that kind of has that amateurish quality. And I like it too. There's like a charm to it. So
I feel like there's probably a parallel with that in like songwriting, production, especially totally. Like in like
punk
the underground.
First prog,
Yeah, right. Totally. Yeah. And also just like call and answer to that, but yeah, I think it's for me personally, like, I just want to make sure that like I'm improving and incrementally on my own work. And that's also sort of a personal thing. So some people might look at my work and they might not even see what I'm been trying to improve upon, it might be something small. And I want to make sure that I have a cool idea. Like if a band comes to me, I want to make sure that I deliver them a cool, something somewhat new and individual to them, whether to their album title or to their lyrics or something, because I feel like sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes the bands I work with, they're not very visual people. And so they might have an idea, but sometimes the ideas are kind of basic, and that's fine. So I want to take it and then maybe put a spin on it that makes it just sort of unique or individual to them, that like they probably wouldn't come up with on their own.
Do you find like your experience in being in bands and a musician, like, I guess you've probably seen how band members who aren't artists themselves would like describe what they're looking for, like maybe even see that firsthand with your experience, and then you're able to then predict, because you're not in the room where the band's meeting, but like that same meeting with like the other, where the bass player has some opinion about, like adding in some art elements. I don't know if it's really a question as much as like your experience in both worlds probably lets you predict what other people are going to say when those decisions are like being made in like the direction. Does that kind of make sense?
For sure. So there's two things as far as the art goes. If I'm hired, whoever the client may be, I forget who taught me this, but whenever you submit sketches, never submit one that you wouldn't want to do, because they'll always choose that one. That's just Murphy's Law. But and that's happened more times than I can count. And then when it came to music and songwriting, I felt like when you're in a more of a traditional band setting, so you're actually working with other people, whereas like Diagonal Path or Idle Engine, I have full control. I steer the whole ship, which is good and bad, and it's at the same time. But I had a sort of a rule that I followed, where if someone spent time on something and they took the time to do it, like, and they had a vision, like, let them figure it out. Let them play it with the drummer. Like if it's a riff or a portion of a song, like let them get it out, like, before you judge it. Cause there's so many times where someone's like, no, that sucks. Like, and they won't, but they won't have an alternative. And that just drove me crazy. Like, so
I can relate.
So, and sometimes if you just hear like one riff on its own, it might not sound sexy or cool, but in context, it might be great, So.
No, I know exactly what you mean. Coming from a drummer's perspective, I always think it's like how the drums play off the riff is what gives it power. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because like there's like, for instance, like the new Blood Incantation album, there's like some like Pink Floyd-y sections, but then he's doing like blast beats over them. And it sounds, there's this band it's like a weird hidden gem. Maybe you've heard of them, but they're called Lycia or Lycathea Aflame. It's like brutal death metal with Nile type modes, but then a lot of like melodic major key sounding stuff. It's fucking weird. Cool. But like Blood Incantation, there's a section in like the back half that literally sounds like one of their riffs, because it's major key, and like you could be playing like this just really light pastoral drum beat and it'd be like a post-rock band, but he's doing a blast beat over it, yet it works like perfectly. So
it's funny. I was watching, I forget what the YouTube channel, he's a metal songwriting guy, but he made an argument that metal isn't a genre, it's sound design.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's so accurate, because like, to your point, you can play pretty much anything, and as long as you have maybe like fast drums over it or harsher vocals or whatever, it becomes it becomes like brought into the metal realm.
Yeah.
And like metal is so broad, it's so vast, and I think like I don't know, that's why actually I love it. It's like
sound
cool.
design and marketing through association. You know what I mean? Like that's another part of it too.
That's true. Yeah, right.
I was kind of curious too, like what was art school like for you?
It was, I mean, just this I went to school in Philadelphia and it was incredible. I love that city. I will say, like in hindsight, like had I known what other options were out there, like I would have probably done like just like different ateliers, like study under a certain artist, because like the humanity courses, all the extra bullshit you have to go through to graduate, it doesn't make any sense. Like the course load is insane. Like, you know, especially like some of my studio classes were 6 hours long, and then you'd have to, you know, fulfill some requirement that has nothing to do with anything that you're interested in. And I mean, that's like life in a nutshell, but if you're paying a lot of money to do it, like like you should be able to sort of, you know, customize it more. But it still was a lot of fun, and I made a lot of great friends, and I worked at an awesome venue when I was in school called the Trocadero. It doesn't exist anymore, but I saw so many shows of every genre. It was incredible for free, so can't complain.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
When you were in art school, then were you actively in a band, or was it like, how did the timeline work there?
Yeah, so I was in a band in Syracuse, where I currently live and where I grew up. And so I would go back and forth for shows and practice and stuff. And then I ended up going back to Syracuse. I would have stayed in Philly had I not had a band, and I came back to Syracuse, and here I am. But yeah, I was in a band. My first band was called Murder of Crows. And we became like, it was the first thing I ever did. So I started when I was like 17, and I kind of learned how to play guitar throughout that band. And then, you know, we started playing more, and I got hooked up with the Earth Crisis guys. And so when Freya, like they needed new guitar players in like 2008. So me and my friend from our band joined Freya. And then just from touring and playing shows and doing art, just kind of started meeting people and making connections. And that's kind of how I've sort of stumbled upon pretty much everything that I have as far as like my career in art or music. So,
because they're obviously linked, like your first covers and stuff, like kind of your breakout into being a professional illustrator, were they with people you knew then in that case?
Yeah. So actually my first like professional gig, actually, guy from the Red Chord hired me to do the Ed Gein cover for Bad Luck. So that was in, I don't know, 2007 or 2006, whatever. And it's just funny that like he's such a good dude, and he's like kind of kept tabs on me this whole time. And you know, on this last sort of tour cycle they did, you know, we were just talking, and I was like, hey man, if you need any t-shirt designs, let me know. And that's how that happened.
Yeah, we'll get that one to show later. Man, I love Red Chord, dude. They were, for me, it was high school, but like, that was one of the first albums I picked up was Pray for Eyes.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, dude, such a good band, and so unique too. Like, they don't really sound like anybody else, and they're like one of the first like deathcore bands, but they don't sound anything like what the genre is now, man. It's
funny. I feel like they came on the coattails of like Burnt by the Sun and Botch, like that kind of stuff, you know. And or maybe they're even like around the same time. I'm kind of foggy on the.
It's like early 2000s, man. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, they're fantastic, and they're such good people. That it's always nice when those two things can exist at the same time.
Yeah.
You know. But
brings back memories, man. What band member is Guy then? Because I haven't.
Oh, he's the vocalist.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, dude,
And
that guy is also like hilarious, like on stage. Like I remember when I saw him, I was like 18 or whatever, but like he had this dead ass like face serious, and he had a wizard painting up, and the whole song he was just like holding the wizard painting up and just like singing and just like, just going like hardcore tough guy. But then there's also that, they like never took themselves too seriously. I love that.
Yeah, no, it's sometimes like like I don't know. It's like, how can you? I guess at a certain point, but I don't know. That's my own taste, I guess.
For sure. How did the relationship with Death Wish form then? Because you sell prints through there, right? So a little plug for anybody who wants to pick up any prints. I'm sure they're high quality and they look awesome.
Jake does an amazing job. Jake Bannon. But so I'm close friends with my buddy who owns Holy Mountain Printing down in Raleigh. I've done many projects for him over the years. He's a huge supporter of the arts in general. He's incredible. And I was just I was asking him, because I thought about maybe starting to explore maybe doing some local art markets and stuff just to make some extra income, and reached out to him to see if he'd print some shirts and maybe do some prints, whatever. And he's like, have you thought about reaching out to Jake? And I was like, well, yeah, but I didn't think he'd have any interest, And so like a good friend, he reached out behind my back to Jake, emailed him. And and so it kind of worked out. So,
nice, man.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So just like, I don't know how things have worked out in your life, but pretty much most of the things I've accomplished are because of just being kind and like making good connections and, just being friends with people.
Yeah, man. It's actually something else I've been thinking about the last couple of weeks in particular, and it's not like a novel concept at all. And I think I might do a solo video on it on the channel. But just about like abundance mindset in the arts,
Yeah.
Like exactly what you're talking about. Like you kind of only get ahead, not just through pushing yourself in your own personal ambitions, but by being good to other people and rooting for other artists. You know what I mean? Like, it's just something that I think about quite a bit. Like, how do you balance being competitive with yourself, and also be propping up other artists all the time and like rooting for them. So I was thinking about doing like a video on it because I don't know, some of that stuff that's not actually related to the techniques. It's more about like the mindset. I find interesting to hear from other artists because a lot of us have neurotic tendencies. So it's good to like, connect and like make sure that you're not alone, thinking about those stuff.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I don't know. It's also nice because, what I've found too is that people, if you want to get jobs in this industry, it's interesting for people that aren't in it. They think like, well, it's just super easy. You have the internet, you've got social media, you can just reach out to people and they'll hire you. But unfortunately, because budgets are smaller and timelines are short, like people want to work with people they trust and that they like. And if, I noticed that if they like you and you deliver, if you can get a job with somebody and you do a good job and you actually like stick to the deadlines and you go above and beyond, like you're probably gonna get a second call,
Yeah. Or referral, like you said,
Yeah.
Yeah,
totally. So,
I mean, and that's the other thing too, is like, when I was reaching out to you, I was surprised you don't have like a giant Instagram following. It has nothing to do with the quality of your work, but it's not massive, but you're consistently getting work and you're obviously incredibly skilled.
Thanks, man. I wouldn't say consistently, but I get enough projects to keep me like making art, but definitely not enough to make a living off of. But
yeah, it's very difficult, especially traditionally, because you're a traditional artist primarily, right?
Yeah. So I dabbled with like doing some digital stuff, but not digital painting, more like photo bashing kind of illustration. and that's a lot of fun. I did it just as a challenge to I don't know, try something new. But I feel like now with AI becoming more prevalent, I feel like that style, like it's easy to confuse with being AI. So I kind of want to be as like analog as possible, and like try to document the process to prove that I'm actually making it and add value to it in that way.
Yeah. I'm doing the same thing. The only area of digital stuff that I want to incorporate in the near future is just getting better with just like a comic book artist would, with like flatting colors and like stuff like screen print. So
Sure.
like doing
Yeah, yeah.
doing ink hand drawn, like, because there's a lot of good artists in the scene who do this kind of approach. Like Shindy Rihal is awesome at this. He just comes top of mind. But doing the pen and ink illustrations, but then digital coloring on top
For
of them. I'd like to experiment more with that, because it kind of takes the best of both worlds for what I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah. I mean, there is no wrong way to make art. I mean, except for, well, I'll walk that back. I don't, using AI is for me, like, that's a non-starter, but as far as like the tools you use, like whatever makes a cool image, that's awesome. So if that's like an avenue that you want to explore, like just go for it. It's awesome. Super cool.
Yeah, my questions. Go ahead.
Oh no, but I was just gonna say for me, like I only use acrylic. I don't use any oil. And acrylic, I know for some people it's a pain in the butt because it dries so fast, or it's also like it dries inconsistently. So, but for me, I've just found a way to like manipulate it, and it's just so much fun. And it's also because it dries so fast, you can kind of layer stuff very quickly. You don't have to wait for it to dry. So.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good segue to getting into some of the art and kind of talking about techniques, because I'm really curious how you approach this, because like it definitely has, a lot of your work has the look of oil, in terms of like, I don't know, there's a lot of depth to all your work. And I have this first example up here because I wanted to hear a little bit about like the sketching phase to completion, if you don't mind.
Sure. Of course. So this was an album cover for Freya. And it was, so I guess the concept of the album was, it was sort of like a post-apocalyptic civilization, and the idea of like, how would society maybe reform how they approach religion, I guess. And so it's like elements from different world religions all kind of sort of colliding into one sort of thing. So there's a lot of different symbolism in this piece. I can't remember exactly all of it now, like 10 years later, but yeah. So I think I took a photo of myself for the sort of human body in the bottom there, and I don't know. I just using different reference. I think I definitely looked at some Paul Komoda sculptures. I don't know if you know him, but some influence. I think some stuff that he did for The Thing, for that set, or that prequel, I guess they made. Yeah, and just trying to make an interesting monster. So, and then with this piece, I don't go this detail anymore with my prelims, but for this, I did the drawing, I scanned it, and then I printed it out at Kinko's on the large format printer. And I learned a method from reading Donato Giancola's blog, where you can like you wet the paper first, you stretch the paper. You don't like fully soak it. I take a spray bottle and I spray it down with water, let the paper relax, and then you take like a matte medium as a adhesive, and you paint it on the back, and then you lay it down on your painting surface, whether it be like illustration board or masonite, and then you take an ink briar, like a roller, and you roll it out flat, get all the air bubbles out, all the extra medium, and let it dry, and it adheres right to the board. And that way you don't have to redraw it. Like there's a lot of times if like you're transferring the drawing with tracing paper, you'll lose detail. So that's a cool way to kind of like preserve the original drawing without ruining the original drawing.
So is the matte medium making a new surface for your prep? Like
so the matte medium, it can if you have it thick, but it really is more of as a glue, I guess, for the paper to adhere archivally to the illustration board. And then you can actually layer on more matte medium or gesso, and you can actually sand it to be smoother if you have enough layers.
Interesting.
So you don't have like ridges, from the paintbrush.
That's really cool, man.
But it can be tough though, because if the paper gets too soggy, it can like pick up and it can definitely like rip. It can
when you're
fold.
using Kinko's paper, you're not even using like high quality stuff though, are you?
No, but also you don't want to use too thick. I've noticed like the thick paper, you'd have to wet it down a lot more. And I found it hard to adhere it to the board. That Xerox paper is just perfect. It's so thin. But it is a double-edged sword. It's like very delicate.
So
it's not an easy process, but it works.
And the artist you learned that from, is that Instagram Donato Arts? He's done all that stuff for like Magic the Gathering and that's that. Like he's an oil painter though, right?
Yep.
Or is he okay?
Yep. But he like when you see his work, it's pretty big. And he does that method on really like he does it on huge pieces of paper, and I have no idea how he does it. Like he lines it up really, really well. I don't know if he like tiles it, but that's a question for him, I guess.
Impressive, man.
Because this piece is like maybe 12 by 12 inches. That's pretty small.
Yeah, very small. One thing I love detail wise with the finished painting is I love the little hints of orange and red that are peeking underneath the snake scales on that right when it touches the fire. Like that's such a nice, satisfying detail. And you have such a good sense of like form. Like everything has really good 3-dimensionality to it. I mean, I like seriously, dude. I love your work, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. A cool little lesson that I learned from my brother, actually, he's also an artist, but is knowing the difference between a form shadow and a cast shadow. And it's such a simple thing, but like a cast shadow is like, where the chin, the shadow of like a chin maybe, or like two limbs like crossing over, and the shadow that's cast by that one arm over the other. Whereas a form shadow is like the turning of something, and that's a softer shadow, whereas a form shadow is hard. And so like that, like those little details, and if you can nail that, like it really helps with dimensionality.
Yeah, great point. So since this was a band that you were a part of, what did it make it easier or harder to sell a concept? Because there's like other, I'll call it baggage, just for the sense of like, you're also a cook in the kitchen when it comes to music. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, so, I lucked out because, so Carl Buechner from Earth Crisis is the vocalist, and he and I shared a very similar vision, and the band trusted me. So like I never got really any pushback on the art side of things. And I will say that I was like the main songwriter in the band, and so that pushback was definitely more on that side of stuff.
Fair enough. That makes sense.
Yeah. But it is what it is.
When it comes to, go ahead.
Oh, I do miss that dynamic of writing music with people in a room. It can be very difficult, but it can be very satisfying too. Yeah. The drummer that we had for the 2 albums that I was with Freya, I was with him for 3, but the 2 that he was a part of, he was a very musical drummer, and he actually came up with a bunch of like patterns, like riff ideas that like he came up with some ideas where it was just like, hey man, can you write a riff to this beat? Mm-hmm. And it was great. It worked out really well. He had some really cool ideas. He was very much he liked Gavin Harrison a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
because he's a very musical player. So
Oh yeah, it's all about the subtlety, man. The guy has the best
Yeah.
ghost notes.
oh, they're
Gavin
so good.
Harrison. When it comes to the application of paint, like I haven't really dabbled much in acrylic, honestly, but I know some of the techniques. Like, are you using airbrush, a lot of layers? Like, kind of, what is your methodology? I guess you could say.
Yeah, so a lot of layers, paint really thin.
Okay.
I use a lot of washes, and I noticed that the more opaque colors, so like when you get into the more cadmiums, the yellows, reds, obviously white, like they kind of dry chalky. And as soon as you add white to anything, it starts to dry a little chalky. The blues, purples, some of the darker greens, like Hooker's green, they can dry more on the glossy side a little bit. But when you add white, it just starts to kind of deaden things. So it's a constant like push and pull of adding layers of washes to kind of bring back a little color. But it's fun because like there's so much fun you can have with like adding different colors and playing with like you can really play with color in shadows more than you can in like the lighter areas, I feel like. So just makes it for an interesting kind of fun time. And it is actually, I have colors that I lean on for stuff that I know it's kind of predictable, but there's always surprises. And sometimes they're happy accidents and sometimes they're not so much.
Yeah. But I mean, the nice thing with acrylic too is there's quite a bit of fixing you can do. Like it's not as yeah. I'm used to working in watercolor and ink, which are, it's always like whenever I make a mistake, it's like, all right, what am I going to do? How do I fix this?
Right. I used to do like just very ornate, like ballpoint pen drawings. Same thing. It's like, there's not much you can fix, especially like, I don't know if you've ever drawn with ballpoint, but like the ink will start to kind of like dry up on the nib, and like you'll be drawing, it'll drop a big glob of ink, You gotta
have that like, paper towel nearby. Yeah.
Right. You just got to keep like spinning the tip on like, paper towel or whatever.
Ballpoint's so satisfying to draw with though, man. I love how you can kind of like layer it on, like instead of focusing on like mark making as much, I think more about like gradients. It's kind of fun.
But it reacts to pressure really well.
Yeah.
But so ballpoint is still like, I kind of reserve that for doing like my sketchbooks and like portraiture and stuff like that. It's just fun.
Definitely. For that. Yeah. Shoot. There was one other question I had. I definitely know what you mean with like the push and pull with like adding white, subtracting it. Like gouache, I find that as kind of a challenge sometimes. That chalky look, I hate it unless I'm going for like a smoke effect. Shit, what was it? Yeah, I don't remember. Oh, well, this is it. So when you do paint in acrylic and you're doing the washes and stuff, are you washing it with like water or some kind of matte medium? Like, what do you?
No, just water. Okay. Yeah, just water. Yeah, super simple. I'm trying to think if there's other little tricks. Just I think it is also like I do wish that I was a little more like, I guess, confident with like color application, but because the acrylic dries so quickly, you're constantly like mixing and remixing the same, trying to match the color, but a lot of times you can't. And so you're just kind of finding that happy medium. But so it's kind of a more laborious process, but it's super fun. Like I really enjoy it.
When you were in art school and like a little bit beyond, like, were you kind of like focused in on acrylic painting, this kind of stuff? Or like, I guess, when did your sense of direction, because you have a pretty established style from like all the works we're going to go through in a good way. It's got a lot of range too, but like, when did you kind of find this path,
So actually I graduated with more of a focus in kids books. So the subject matter was much happier, a little more simplistic, a little more cartoonish. and I actually was focused on ballpoint pen. Actually, that was my portfolio was all ballpoint pen drawings. And I had a few acrylic paintings, but even like the base of it was mostly ballpoint pen with like washes over top, some opaque paint. But I think I had an agent out of school for a very short while, and by the time, actually, I'm gonna go before that actually. So I had a professor in school, incredible artist, Tim O'Brien. He's done time, like he does tons of time covers, like all the ones with Trump like behind his desk, or like he does a lot of like yeah, time covers and National Geographic stuff. Anyway, we had an assignment, and it was like one of the first ones where there was like hardly any direction, because up until that point it was like very regimented, and like we were focusing on a certain thing, and it like the only thing we had to do was have hands in a piece. So everyone in class was like panicking, like because they want to get a good grade and make our teacher happy. And so even with that little direction, people didn't know what to do. And so I did a piece of like, I had a sketch in my sketchbook of the Three Stooges, like all sort of like, in this sort of like beating on each other or whatever. And he comes over to me and he goes, "Man, I'd see that in a mall kiosk." And I was like, "Oh man, it's such a blow to the ego." Like he just sort of like, like you just, and so he like looked through my sketchbook and he saw this like weird monster, and he's like, "Why don't you do that?" Because the monster was like smoking a cigarette. And I was like, "I can do that." And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "This is what I want you to do. This is what you obviously enjoy doing." So he's like, so from that point, like that one critique, that like humiliating moment was such a cool, like this like spark, like, aha, like, okay, like I can actually do what I want to do. And so from that point, that's when I sort of steered more into kids' books. And then from when I was with the agency, I got signed. Well, but by the time I had my contract signed, the guy who found me either quit or got fired. I don't know. So I had 5 people I was talking to that didn't know who I was, didn't know my portfolio, didn't care. And so they got me a bunch of like editorial work that was like 24-hour turnaround. And it was abysmal. It was terrible. And I eventually got dropped from the agency. And then because I was in bands, I just started doing like, t-shirt designs and album artwork and stuff like that. And I've always liked the darker subject matter. I always liked monsters. So it just was a good fit.
Yeah.
That's a very weird lineage, but.
Well, I mean, I can relate though too that especially kind of like more of the vintage variety, but man, some of those children's books and like the illustrators who worked on them are so cool and so good. Like, I mean, that obviously is like what inspires most artists to like start picking up stuff, is they pick up the books and they're like, holy shit. And like, there's so much creativity. And like I'm gonna blank on it, but I was on Instagram, there was this guy and he was talking about vintage children's books. And yeah, this is it. I'll put an image up, but have you ever heard of the artist Krishna Turska? It's a Polish artist who was born in the 30s, but I think died around like 2002. But dude, some of the stuff she did was like just so like magical and whimsical, but like, I don't know. I'll put some images up, but dude, it's just, I'm really in that golden age of fantasy illustration kind of phase right now, like Arthur Rackham and I mean all those guys, awesome. Edmund Dolock. Like I'm really in that right now.
Do you know the Dugins? It's Andrzej Dugin and Olga Dugina. They're a couple. Their artwork, their kids' books are incredible. They're Russian and like just super detailed. Very much of like, it kind of reminds me of that like Bruegel, Hieronymus Bosch sort of kind of thing.
Okay, yeah.
Super cool stuff, and they're current. I think they're still making work. Also, Gennady Spirin is another awesome illustrator. He's Russian as well. But their work is beautiful. And I think that to what you were saying, like Arthur Rackham, it kind of fits in with that kind of realm.
Yeah. Yeah. That beautiful stuff, man. And definitely endless inspiration as well. All right.
Yeah.
So moving on, tell me a little bit about both of these.
So I think a theme that I like to visit, especially in my personal work, is sort of the ongoing clash between like science and art, or science and religion rather. Sorry. And so this is the piece on the left is like the Four Horsemen, and it's sort of the idea of like nature sort of taking over sort of these old ideas. And then the one on the right is called Canonized, I think, but it's also sort of like being blinded by sort of religious ideology. Yeah.
So both these are personal pieces?
Yeah. They were done for gallery shows. I work with Wow by Wow. It's an online gallery, and I think I created both those for that gallery.
Yeah, I know. I know some other artists who are involved in that. How does Wow by Wow work?
So Tim McLean, he's also an illustrator. He reached out to me years ago, like when he first started it, and I think he knew me because of Freya, actually. And so I've been working with him on and off. I haven't done a show for him in a while, but he's so cool and lenient, and like he'll reach out to you like biannually with like a block of like, because they're all group shows and there's no theme usually. And so he'll just reach out and see what shows you can do if you want to do them. So
it's always nice when somebody's an artist and then also a gallery, facilitator, like they get it,
Totally. Yeah. So that's kind of like, so some of the pieces I sent you to show here, I think are going to be in that sort of same kind of theme.
Awesome, man. What's interesting too is, I don't think like all artists abide by any means, but like green is kind of a hard color to work with for some folks. Like unless I'm going for like a landscape or something like that is a watercolor or something, green isn't a color I go for. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
Is it just kind of always been a natural color for you to play around with, or?
I think I've had my acid green period, but I really like it. I think also green and purple just work really well together.
Yeah.
But it's fun. I don't know. And it's funny. Sometimes I'll have a vision in my head of like how I want the color to be. And sometimes it's like I'll put something down and it'll be a happy accident. And I'll just go with it.
Yeah.
But this one, actually, the piece on the right was actually also inspired by, I think it was that Caravaggio painting of Medusa's head. You know what I'm talking about?
I could see it. Yeah, totally.
So it's kind of that concept too.
Yeah, man. So some of the things that I love about, let's start on the one on the left. You're talking about like the importance of like a strong, like iconic silhouette amidst all the detail. You got that. Like it's, you could look at it from a distance and it like just has that striking feel to it. There's a lot of depth in both of these in terms of those intricate details. So it never hurts the eye, but there's always more to look through. And then just a good sense of flow. I mean, that's something that I put a bunch of like emphasis on in my work, is like everything going in a certain direction and guiding the eye. And
sure.
I mean, there's one on the left, the Four Horsemen's piece. I think that is probably my favorite of yours. Just because it has like that surrealism aspect, limited color palette, and then all those like just juicy details. So I don't know. I seriously really, really love it, man.
Thank you. You'll probably notice too, in a lot of my work, I kind of come back to a lot of the same textures. Like I love using like tree bark and like shells, like that kind of like look. So a lot of that stuff
There's a
will
little
come
bit of
in.
biomech in there, you know.
So yeah, a little
which
bit.
I love. And then with the other one on the right there, dude, I love it's like they're kind of like cast shadows, like you were talking about with all the different that kind of crown of thorn and branches, like the fact that they're just like implied there, like that adds such like a cool layer of depth. You know what I'm talking about? With just like
yeah.
like, so what was your, I mean, I don't know when you did this, but what was kind of your mindset when you were creating those little effects there?
Well, I think without those there, it felt a little empty, but I also didn't want to take away from like the light that currently existed. And so I thought it would just, like you said, it would add a layer of depth and kind of give it like, either are they cast shadows? Are they just like, are they more branches that are just silhouetted by a backlight? You know, but it just adds that layer of depth to it. And it's not totally taking away from the directional light it's hitting the face and the branches towards the eye, like the floating eye above. And it kind of adds to the flow of the piece, like, you know, like that sort of like twirling tornado of you know, thorns. So
if you were to do either of these pieces again, what would be one thing you might change? Either one of them.
I think the the sickle, I think, is a little on the nose, but it's cool. It kind of does its purpose, like as far as a directional element. And then for people that like might not pick up on the reference, it kind of really brings it home. But I think that's a little too on the nose, I think, for my taste right now. And the one on the right, I don't know. I probably might like, I don't know. I think I'm kind of satisfied with that one. Like, I don't know if I could improve upon it in this moment. I'm sure there's someone that it probably can, it probably has improvement to be made, but right now I don't know what I would do.
Yeah, no, I'm always curious what people say about their own work, because we all tear it up ourselves, and like, I wouldn't have thought anything about the scythe there, but fair enough.
Yeah. It's just, you know, like you said, we're picky in our own neurotic ways.
So we got two pieces here. The one on the right, you sent me, and then on the left, I just really love the textures and like, man, that the cast shadow on those craters, like such a cool effect. But yeah, tell me a little bit about these.
So the one on the left actually is the biggest painting I've ever done. It's 2 by 3 feet, and it's on cradled masonite. And it's a super fun surface. It's like it was like pre-treated or whatever with gesso, but it had that really smooth surface. It took paint really well. It also varnished really well. But that was for a solo show I had a couple of years ago, and I just had this idea of this weird visitation of this like human skull meteor above like an ancient stone circle, and just something very bold, and especially being such a big piece, I thought that'd be really cool. And then it also too, just like the whole point was it was a study in like that weird rock texture. So I had this rock I found on a hike, and it had those cool like dimpled effects. I don't know if it was like limestone or what, and I kind of wanted to make like a big piece based off of that texture. And then on the right, that piece is actually very small. It's 8 by 8 inches.
I can see the difference in scale now. I should have changed them a little bit. I was going for color.
No, I think that's great. But that was just a fun piece. Like, you know, I like to do seasonal stuff, and that was just a fun Halloween piece. So that's Edgord Allan Poe. Yeah. And I love I think my favorite part of the piece is his weird scared look, but his all the fingers.
Yeah. He looks like he's, you know what it looks like? Instead of it being like the pumpkin master, like, like evil thing. It looks like somebody got cursed to be a pumpkin. You know what
Right,
I mean?
yeah, totally.
Like they were afflicted with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. I like the side kind of like angled profile you have, and the way the eyes like look to the viewer with that scared look. That's a really good point. Is that kind of a happy accident, or did you have that even mapped out in the sketch phase?
No, yeah, in the sketch phase, I think he might have been more menacing in the original sketch, but as I started painting, and I think I maybe angled the mouth in a certain way, and I was like, man, he just looks like he's just this weird, sheepish kind of like he's like timid, There's a cool humanity to that.
Yeah. The one on the left, man, I do love how you did that color transition from the purple all the way, like the sunset kind of effect. This piece reminds me just a hair of like Bruce Pennington. You know what I mean? With like kind of the color schemes and also the sense of scale. Like it's obviously like its own thing, but just when I saw it, I was like, it just kind of reminded me a bit.
I'll take it.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of curious. I don't want to label you, but like, who would be somebody that people would be like, oh, your work kind of reminds me of this? Like, what's the most common example?
Oh, what's his name? My brain. Oh, Paul. Damn it. He did all the Mastodon stuff.
Paul Romano?
Yeah, Paul Romano. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I could see that.
People have said that just because of my color usage, probably, and I don't know how I maybe approach form or something. I'm not exactly sure, but I've gotten that a couple times from people.
Are you a fan of Wayne Barlow at all?
I am. I got that too. And it's funny because I was unaware of his
design.
Work.
You know what I mean?
Well, thank you. I was unaware of his work for a long time, and someone said that, and I looked him up, and I was like, "Oh, all right, I can see that. All right."
Yeah. No, I love Wayne Barlow as well.
I also don't know how I missed him because he's like such a epic, like well-known person, especially in like dark art and like fantasy.
Yeah, I guess just moment in time. Yeah, I mean, I'm fairly recent, like the last 4 years, in terms of finding his work as well.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of it was like he that book that he did, the Guide to Extraterrestrials, that came out in like could be late 70s, 80s. I'm a 90s kid, so like it just part of it's probably just a little bit generational.
Yeah.
So this is the Replacire cover. This was the first time I'd ever seen your work, and I remember seeing this cover and just be like, holy shit, who did this? And then I never looked it up, unfortunately. But I was like, when I saw it now, I was like, oh my God, he's the guy who did this. This is like such a good cover, man. Oh my God.
Thank you.
I love it.
There's actually kind of a fun story. So this album was called Do Not Deviate. And I think originally the meaning of that for them was very positive. It was such a struggle to make this album. And they hit roadblocks at every turn. And so Do Not Deviate was like supposed to be like motivational, but when I listening to the music and the lyrics, I saw it as more of like the human condition and it being like a crutch and being like, so these are all like these human statues with like DNA helixes that are like falling apart and they're ascending upwards, but because they're falling apart, like we can't ascend to like the next level of consciousness or of whatever that might be. So we're like doomed because of the human condition to just wallow in misery.
Just brilliant, man. Like the tilted horizon line has that uneasy feeling. You got the sense of flow. Just it's fucking great, man. Dude.
That's actually that tilt is a little tip I got from Dan Dos Santos. Where you take your drawing, like a lot, we might all sort of draw like with a flat horizon because it's just like what we're used to. But then if all you got to do is take your drawing and just tilt it, and it really adds, like you're saying, it adds that like uneasy feeling. It might add some tension, excitement.
So when you're saying like the tilting, did you draw it straight on and then you just
Yeah.
tilted it when you're painting? Okay.
Yep.
All right. Allow my slow brain to figure this out real quick. So is that literally it? So your original drawing would be like this, and then when you apply it to the canvas, you just tilted it? That's
So yeah,
literally it?
yeah, exactly. So I did the drawing. I wish I had it in reach, but like the drawing is like the horizon's flat. So if you just tilt it clockwise, like 20 degrees or whatever, that's how I drew it. And then when I scanned it and I put it in the computer, this is also, I did the same method on the Paragon cover where I printed out on Xerox paper and I transferred the paper to board and all that stuff. So when I scanned it, I tilted it in Photoshop and I printed it out that way.
It's awesome, man. The effect, because I imagine the original drawing then has a more peaceful look to it.
I mean, I guess it's
not
peaceful.
Like not a ton, but like there's a sense of like, I don't know. It really does add to it.
And also I think the pillars too, being on an angle like that, like it just, it wouldn't, I don't know. Yeah. It wouldn't be as dynamic, I think, if it were just horizontal and perpendicular and, vertical. I will say the one thing, you didn't ask this, but if I were to do this again, I'd definitely push the value, and maybe have a lighter light behind him to kind of like add more of a silhouette. Because I think if you like squint at it, it's lacking like the light. It's got the dark, but it needs just a little more like push, I think. And I think I would have probably drawn some of the background a little better, but I did this quite a while ago. So
yeah, well,
probably 12 years or something. So,
well, it also goes to show like, even if technically you do it better now, the power of a good composition just to even begin with carries a lot of the weight. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I appreciate you saying that. And I think I am proud of the concept too. I think it's a cool concept, and it's something that's just like kind of odd and also open enough to interpretation,
Yeah. Sweet, man.
So,
what about this one?
This was for the band No Zodiac, for the album Population Control. And that was actually released by Holy Mountain Music, my friend Danny. And so the band originally, they wanted a Baphomet, but I think they wanted a noose in one hand and like a severed head in the other. And to me, that just like, it felt like redundant or like felt kind of weird. Like, why would you have a noose and a severed head? I don't know. And so I came up with the idea of like, let's just make the Baphomet commit seppuku, or, and the nooses out of its entrails. I thought that was way cooler and grosser.
Nice, man. Yeah.
And just like a kind of a twist on their idea, but also like the common Baphomet. And then I think in hindsight, and I think I heard later, like after I finished the piece, like the band wanted the Baphomet to be on a pile of skulls. And I was like, wow, there's a lot, like you have this thing about heads, like you wanted a noose and a severed head and lots of skulls. Like it felt like a lot of,
that's a common thing, more skulls when you're working with a metal band.
But again, like I also wanted, like a more epic, sort of simple, more simple, and make like, I think the concept was dark enough. Like, I don't know. And like the horns too, like having that, like the 6 horns was a fun thing to do.
I mean, if you did do all those skulls, they'd be pretty heavy in shadow like you have here.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a way to make it work for sure. But I think,
well,
and I think
too, they would be so subtle that the amount of work to go into them to get them all rendered right. I like what you did where it's more straightforward and simple, because you know that the eye needs to go in certain places and other places could be a distraction pretty easily.
Right. And also like you got to leave room for text and,
yeah.
But, I think it could have been cool, but I remember hearing it from like Danny after the fact, after it was painted, and they're like, oh, they're hoping for skulls, but I told them not to worry about it. Like it's great the way it is. And I was like, all right, cool, thanks. Like you saved me a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then the piece on the right is the back cover.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah. Because the front cover is for a jewel case. So like the front insert's a square, and then the back has to be a little wider. You have to include the spine.
Is it completely repainted, or did you use parts of the?
Oh, it's completely repainted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. That was a really fun piece, and kind of a benchmark for myself, I think, just as far as like the design and the anatomy, and how I painted certain elements. I actually really like the subtlety in the anatomy on the right, like the shoulders and the biceps, like where the bicep, like kind of like, where the bicep meets and connects underneath the shoulder.
Yeah.
So like that, those kind of details were really, and also like the stringy hair. I like that effect.
You know how difficult it is to get some of that stuff. You're like, that's like the subtlety of like Sergeant, you know what I mean? Like when I think of like these kind of things where it's like it can look off real quick.
Yeah, for sure. And to go back to like what you were saying earlier about like, focusing on a style, I think it's that's really important, I think, but also having some side projects of like, if you want to dabble with figures, just knowing some anatomy, knowing some structure is really important. So there's like a believability to it. There's like weight,
Yeah.
Unless you want to go full Cartoon Network and have just like string arms, that's fine too. Like but it depends on like what your goal is,
Well, when you say, so some people talk study anatomy differently. Like there's some schools that it's like you actually are learning all of the muscle names and all that stuff. Like I've seen some really talented artists and they speak that language. Whereas for me, it's a little more, I know when it's off and I'll take a lot of reference and speak in like common terms, not like the scientific. What is it for you?
Yeah. So I know I'm not super hardcore into like all the names, but I know enough. But I think the most important thing is like just understanding sort of what lies beneath. Like if you do want to like lean a little bit into realism, like understanding like how the body moves, what muscles are activated, like just their basic forms, like how you can learn the rules to break them properly, I guess, but you don't need to like dive super deep into it. But I think it is helpful, especially if you just like the Stan Prokopenko, like the Proko videos that he has on YouTube. Dude, he's so good at explaining it in a very like simplistic way. But there's still a lot of information there. It's very approachable.
Proko's great resource.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny. I feel like the way that you explained how you approach anatomy is how I approach like music theory, because I'm self-taught guitar player, and so like I just listen to a lot of music, and I talk to a lot of musicians and I listen to a lot of videos about theory, and so like I know enough to like know what I want to hear, but I could not like sit in with a bunch of musicians that like pro session guys. I'd have no idea.
Yeah, we're opposites in that regards. I didn't go to college for music, but I have a lot more formal training in drumming and music than I do in art. I'm more self-taught in that direction. But self-taught, I don't know how to describe self-taught in the internet age, because I've sought out information, and I've learned a lot from other people. So I don't know. I just didn't go to art school, basically.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.
Well, and most people that I've had on that have gone to art school, they have varying degrees of whether they got a lot out of it or not. But pretty much all of them would agree that most of the learning came after. It was just the starting point.
Sure.
For acrylic painting, it must have been, because you weren't even really doing that stuff that much at the time, were you?
Yeah. I think also too, I will say that like sometimes, and I don't know if this is your experience, but if you know too many rules, like it almost becomes hard to break out of them. And like a lot of my earlier paintings, like I kind of stick to like an analogous color scheme. Like this piece in particular is kind of in that realm where like you've got like your three colors that are sort of next to each other, and then the complement.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with that. But like I was so stuck with like this very rigid way of thinking about color that it took me many years to kind of just like say fuck it and break free, you know, or just try to explore other options. And I feel like I have worked with some musicians that are like so strict on like, well, you can't put that mode with that mode, and you know, it's like that doesn't work. And it's like, but it sounds cool. Like, why can't I? You know, like
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a happy medium, you know, like knowing, like educating yourself and getting to know things, but like not letting it dictate too much of like your creativity.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. Well said. Can you hear my dog snoring at all, or not at all?
I can't. I want to.
Well, no, you can't. So, yeah, I'm taking care of my parents' lab, and it's hard to know what the mic's picking up. But if you can't hear it, then I won't, rustle them a little bit. All right. I just love this, man. I just thought it was awesome. Definitely prefer the one on the right, but
I mean, there is a charm to it for sure. I think that's a 4-year-old me that did that. I can't remember exactly, but my parents recently sold their house, and I found that in a stack in a box, and I thought it'd be just fun to kind of recreate it. So it was just a quick, I think I spent maybe like, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours on that left piece.
Very
just
efficient. I mean, you covered a lot of ground. The texture is awesome. Good way to explore that, right? The crocodile kind of texture.
Totally. Yeah, and it has like that iguana type little knob on its jaw.
That's it. Yeah, man. Yeah.
Yeah, but that was a fun thing. I have a few other ones I kind of want to redo as well, but I don't know if I matched the one on the right. Like the red teeth are pretty great.
They're kind of, you should have done that, man. But then the fire doesn't pop as much, so yeah.
Right, and also the nostrils too. Like,
yeah, kind of like a flounder,
Yeah, right.
Here's a random question: did you grow up having reptiles?
I actually, so both my dad and my brother were allergic, so we had little anoles, like little lizards.
Okay.
Yeah.
You just you have such a drawn to like texture as part of your style, and I was just kind of curious because you've done a couple that have like some reptilian kind of skin textures, and you're so good at it too. I didn't know if it just like was absorbed in your DNA. I grew up with a lot of reptiles.
I mean, it might be. That's a great point. I never even thought of that. But
you definitely were a dino kid, not a train kid, right? Were you into dinosaurs? Yeah, okay. I'm right about something.
Yep, sharks and snakes. Those were my favorites.
Oh yeah, nice. Oh yeah. Well, we're around the Christmas time, and this might be like one of the best like Krampus type illustrations I've ever seen. Honestly, dude, I love this.
Thanks, man. Thank you. Again, sort of like the pumpkin there. I would usually do a Krampus around this time every year. Haven't gotten around to it this year, but so this is from a couple years ago. But and every year I kind of push like how much goat do I do, how much human devil do I do. This one went way more in the goat direction.
Yeah.
So
really good job on the eyes too. Like, there's only just those little hints of like, light. That's a common mistake people make is they make the eyes too bright, and you don't have that.
I make that mistake often, actually. So
I mean, yeah, it's a pretty common one because it always feels wrong to like obscure it, but then when you get it just right, it's like, oh yeah, that's realistic now.
Well, it's funny when you go to, any major museum and you see some of like, you know, whether it be Renaissance, Baroque, realist, like, and the eyes are very subtle, but then there's that one little dab of highlight, and the highlight sometimes isn't that bright, but it just adds just that sheen to it.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. Anything else on this one?
No, it's.
I mean, you did a little bit of like invention in the horns because I don't think there's any Rams that have exactly that. Like, you didn't take an exact Ram horn; you were just inspired by it.
Yeah, totally.
I haven't seen that. Yeah, that's cool. Well, I mean, is there like a common trap that you find that you end up like fixing with most pieces that's just kind of like that aha moment, or is with each piece is it just different? Like, I'm wondering what the stumbling block is for you. Even though you're obviously very experienced, there still has got to be something.
I think for me, it is the earlier stages. I think it's in the sketching phase. It's in the idea creation phase. That's where I stumble the most and where I have the hardest time getting motivation to start a piece. But once I have the idea, once I have the sketch like in a good place, like I'm excited to start the painting. There are moments where you're in a phase where like, oh man, this looks like crap. You just got to kind of work through it. But luckily I haven't really faced that in a while. But definitely in the early stages, there's always that like that real slow start.
Yeah.
So.
About these two.
So the one on the left was an album cover for a band. I forget where they're from, Midwest somewhere, but they're called Burden to Bear. And I forget exactly the lyric that I picked up on for the concept. But again, it was another sort of religion, science sort of thing. But this is sort of the death of death. And so like death is doing this like sort of Shakespearean thing of like looking at his own skull. Like this, and then him being overtaken by branches, like him and his pale horse. And then the moon is like I don't know if you noticed, I love painting moons, but the crescent moon is definitely like a symbolism for time, like passing time. So yeah, so that's what that is. And then the one on the right is just an Icarus homage. And I kind of wanted to make the whole figure look like he's made out of wax.
Yeah. And you got a little bit of a tilt on that one too, with the horizon line. Really, really nice. Nice job on the clouds on that one too. Like you got a nice variety there. And then with the one on the left, really good job on the drapery and the folds. What was your method of like getting reference for those?
So I took a photo of myself with a bed sheet for the top part, and I was holding a broom in my hand, and then for the larger drapes, like on the bottom, I had just hung a sheet from the corner of a door, and kind of just fixed the sheets saw where they kind of laid naturally, but then I would kind of fix them, and then as I drew, I kind of designed things too, that would just look better.
Very cool. Yeah, I figured there had to be some kind of like guide. I mean, there's always like the figuring it out as you go, but I mean, I guess some people like just know drapery that well, but I always find it very helpful to get reference with that kind of stuff. Just a second guess what your gut instinct is. Cause like it's like I know enough to make it not look terrible, but like to get it that really, really good, crisp and confident look, it's very helpful to have it.
And also there's like a controlled randomness to it. Like that happens naturally, that like it's really hard to design it if you don't paint it very often, which I don't. And also too, the cast shadow versus form shadow is really important when it comes to drapery.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because also too, how the shadow will, like the shadow of one piece of fabric over another, and how that will like fold, it'll bend rather with the fold is important to like to make it believe like there's like it's a rounded, like a rounded form or whatever.
Yeah. I haven't dipped into the book a ton yet, but whenever I need it, I have it. But there's a Bern Hogarth book called Drapery and Folds, and the entire book is just dedicated to like, and it is a bit exaggerated because that's kind of his approach, but it's definitely helpful as like a starting, like just in how it interacts, and especially stuff like creases, and like elbows and stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But yeah. Do you have like an art book collection, or do you do a lot of stuff digitally, like when you're gathering stuff?
I've got a big art book collection, but I do a combination of both.
Yeah. Any recommendations you want to mention for the audience and for me? Because I'm a collector as well. I'm always looking for good stuff.
Well, I guess I've got books of all the artists I've already mentioned. There's an awesome book I got from Super Ronnie, that Japanese publisher.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what they're called. It's called Stonehouse's Anatomy. It's an awesome book. Really detailed. What else?
Is that like art instruction based, or is it?
Yeah, but it definitely is. It's got more of an illustration kind of like vibe to it.
Okay.
And it's fun to look at and to kind of like learn from. I've got a big kids book collection too. I got I forgot what the publisher is, but they released like a Sergio Topi like compendium of like all this work, and I've got most of those books. Dean Cornwell. There's an awesome. I'm trying to think. So, some of like the cool like art of modern rock, like it's like the book of like rock posters. It's a really, really cool book. If like you're looking for inspiration for color design or for just composition, it's really, really well done. That Mike Mignola, like the Hellboy covers, that's a really good book.
Does that have other artists as well who've done covers, like Corbin and stuff?
It's just him.
Just him. He just did a watercolor gallery, and that has a book that went along with it. I just bought that. It'll probably be expensive in a couple years, so if you guys like Mignola and more of his paintings, I would recommend picking it up. I think it's called Blood, Ink, and Water. It's really good.
Was that his like COVID illustrations, or is that something separate?
It's after that. So it's like in the last year and a half or so, it looks very Mignola, but he's been doing a lot more watercolor stuff, wet on wet specifically, and that's kind of the type of watercolor that I really, really like. So it kind of takes the things that I love about what, both the medium, but then also his kind of like blocky and structural like approach to designing just composition. So it's really, really good. I recommend that book. It's like a $30 book or so right now.
Oh, cool. That's not bad. Yeah. I also, anything like Doré, if you can find any Doré collections, like his Bible illustrations or, like they're just so awesome. Just especially if you're working in black and white, if you're like working in pen and ink, even though they're mostly engravings or etchings, but
you can do that via pen and ink if you want, if you're motivated enough. Yeah,
of course. Like if you're Aaron Horkey or something,
yeah. We all aspire to get around that level,
I hope he makes a book someday, because he's definitely been a huge inspiration for many years. He's for me, as far as a modern artist go, he's like one of those people where like it's a two-pronged effect where like he equally makes me want to stop making art, but also inspires me to make more art. Just depends on the day, I guess.
He's the one that everybody mentions when they describe that. You know what I mean? And I get why. What's interesting though is with him, I don't want to like study him too much, because I feel like some people already are, and it's like not the same. So it's like it's tempting to want to study his work more than I
Sure.
think I probably would want to. And if for some reason he's watched some episodes in the past. I mean, obviously I have a ton of respect for what you're doing, man. I mean, you're one of the best in the world. Everyone's got to figure out their own path. You know what I mean?
That's very true.
All right. These two, man.
So the one on the left is actually the new album cover for the Diagonal Path album I just finished.
Oh, awesome.
And the album is called This Was an Ocean. And it's about my lead singer's mom passed away from dementia. And so when I was talking with him about lyrical ideas, like the last song on the album I had written is inspired by like this area of New York State. It was an ocean at one time. And so a lot of the landscape is like sedimentary limestone and a lot of fossils. And so like the song was kind of inspired by that sort of visual. And so I started telling him that story, and I was like, you can use it for inspiration if you want, take it or leave it. And he's like, well, the first two songs are about my mother. And I had this aha moment where you could combine the two, where like the landscape is like a brain in like a later stage of like a mental illness like that, where like the memories are starting to kind of come like surface, but they're sort of like destroyed and they're not whole. And it's this like this other lifetime, this other like history that's being exposed by the elements and just by time. And then also too, I started at this time sort of getting into the idea of the determinism and like the psychosocial model of like, you know, free will. Does it exist or not? That kind of thing. And how like all of our decisions, who we are as people, our taste in things is sort of informed by like every experience that we've faced throughout our lives and also our biology. And so like that kind of inspired like the sedimentary rock aspect as well. And so, yeah. So I thought like just the title too, This Was an Ocean, kind of like it was this one grand, at one time it was this grand thing, and now it's not.
I mean, I think from a technical level, this might be your best piece, man. Because like there's such confidence in the softness of everything, and like the way that you did the depth and the, you know, darker values up in the corner, kind of cutting across, and then you have the, you know, all those birds, man, and like there's depth within the birds. Like it's unreal work, man. Like,
thank you.
What's cool about it is like, I don't want to go on a giant rant again, but there's work that is so ambitious because it's very intense. You can tell how much work and everything went into it. But then there's also work that is so good because everything fell into place and it almost seems effortless, but I know that there was a ton of effort that went into it. This is in the latter because there's a simplicity to it, but everything is so well thought out. You know what I mean? And like
Thanks, man.
I mean, to me, that's what every artist should aspire for, is when, you know, it's a simple thing really, really well executed. So I don't know.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah. But I bet I struggled with this painting with the tributaries. Like they were simple when I first did the sketch, and then I was like, oh, they need to be more random and a little more meandering, like they would be in a real delta. But then I got too busy, so I had to like kind of like cut it. I had to fill them in. And then the birds were actually sort of like an idea towards the end where like, I want to give more scale to this.
Yeah. And
also give a sense of time, like, you know, like that cinematic idea of like a beach and like the gulls, you know. And then, you know, like the cast shadow was like with the angle of light, like how far would that cast shadow go?
Yeah.
Does it really matter? Like, do I have, like, is it believable enough where it is, you know? What color is in the cast shadow? Like, how does the water, how does the sand and rocks look in like the shadow area? All that stuff. was fun. I will say I'm kind of on the fence. I have another version of this with the logo, the band logo and the album title, but it's cropped because when I added the logo on the top part, and when I did that, the weight got completely shifted, and so I kind of like I cropped it in so the head's a little lower in the composition, but I kind of like having no logo. I might actually release just this as the album cover without any album title.
I could see that. Do you happen to have like an icon for the logo at all?
I mean, the logo is definitely it's a cool design that my friend did. My buddy Mike Wahlberg. I don't know if you know him. So he did the logo, but I feel like I don't know. Like I'm on the fence. I haven't really decided yet. So
I mean, it doesn't need it. I was thinking an alternative for you to consider, because I'm with you. It looks complete like this, but like what Dark Tranquility has done, where it's like DT and it's like this little icon thing. I was just thinking if you had an icon for Diagonal Path, you could put that in like a corner, and then it's supplemental instead of being.
That's a cool idea. That's actually a really good idea. I didn't really think of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could just do it just as is, and it looks really, really good.
And part of me actually kind of likes just having I've never had the confidence to like just release an album without the band name. Like no one knows my band anyway, so it's like so if people are gonna like be looking for it, they're gonna like I don't know, they'll probably do their due diligence, hopefully. But it'll probably like be like my best friend and his girlfriend. But and then the one on the right is an album cover I did for a friend. His band's called Empires in Orbit, and he had a concept of it being like it was sort of like dark and light, life and death, like just these very more simplistic sort of like notions. So this was sort of this. I have no idea how I arrived on this, but it was just from like a day of sketching, and like this sort of like Mother Earth sort of thing. And so like the moon's path is like the border of life and death.
Mm. Yeah, man. Really cool. I love that glowing underside that's hitting the skull there. Kind of like magma-like. Really cool.
Mm. Oh, and also it was a double album, so he wanted an illustration that could be used twice, but in a different way. So we talked about different concepts and like doing one maybe like in black and white and having certain elements like for one album, like maybe have like certain elements that are in color and certain ones that aren't. And then in the other album doing a similar thing, but I decided to like make an image that could work upside down. So,
okay.
So if you flip it, the albums are called Notes from the Ether, Above and Below. So this is for above, and below is flipped.
Interesting. I'll have to do that.
It's on my Instagram. It's on my Instagram. You can see them there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then this is the last one. I must have forgotten to put the red cord illustration in here. I meant to. But tell me a little bit about these two.
So the one on the left is called Terraformer. That one I did quite a while ago, but that I think was another sort of benchmark piece, I think, for myself. Just I think how I handle the acrylic paint in that, and the lighting of the brain, the lightning effect, like those are some elements that like I had some aha moments of like how to accomplish certain effects. And it was just a fun, bizarre illustration. And even like the background is so simplistic. The mountain line is just a brush stroke.
Oh.
So if you were to zoom in on it, you can just see it, just like you can see like just the brush sort of like going across the page. And then the moon behind, like that's like behind the tree and mountains, I just traced like the bottom of a bottle, and then I painted it solid, and I just took a wet brush and I just scumbled out like the negative like marks. So it's a very simple approach.
Do you like it that way?
I do, actually.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I want to bring back into some of my current pieces, is some of that like I think you were saying earlier, like this sort of effortless sort of feel to it, where it's like there's a confidence to it, you know. Definitely. And it like there's just enough information with value that you like from afar it looks, there's no question on what it is, but when you look at it closely, you're like, oh wow, it's like very simple.
Absolutely. And I love this little like hand bat thing on the side here. Really cool.
Thanks. I think that was for Wow by Wow, actually. And I didn't really have a whole bunch of time. I think it was my own just my poor time management, I guess. But I literally just put my hand down on the sketch pad. I traced it and I added an extra finger. And I just started just adding eyeballs and horns and like those gross double nails.
But there's like, did you look at like how bats' wings work? Because like that bend being that sharp is like really cool. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing, we were talking earlier about like sense of flow. With this, it's like there's an anatomical like stiffness, which is really neat.
I definitely looked at a lot of bat wings. I looked at a lot of elephant skin. I looked at a lot of a lot of like really old human skin, you know, like just like that weathered, chapped look, like on how like where does light like hit the wrinkles, you know?
Yeah.
That was actually a lot of fun. Really a pain in the butt, but it was fun.
What was the trickiest part with this one?
Probably like sort of getting the wrinkles right. And like I think it really starts with like a good drawing. So just like taking a brush with like the darker color, the shadow color, and just like drawing in all the wrinkles, all the knuckles, you know, and then adding the mid and light tones after, and just having like, you know, sort of like if you were to draw a snake scale, it's like just like the weird crisscrossing lines too. Yeah. Just sort of where the fingers move, you know, over the years.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because you can see the skin kind of pull around the knuckles. Like, yeah, excellent. Well, dude, I really appreciate all this and going in so much detail. And you shared some secrets, man. You know, you could have just kept those to yourself, but
what's the point in that? Of course.
Yeah. I feel like there's been a lot of good nuggets from this one, and I think something that I'm kind of leaving with each one of these, I get different things that I get out of the conversation. With this one, it's just like this road to perpetual learning and improvement and being patient with it. That's kind of what I'm kind of leaving with. But
that's good. I like that.
What would be maybe some advice you would have for like other artists or things you've learned that you like to share to close out?
I think if it's something that you're passionate about, and like, you know, you got to be stubborn and you got to just persevere, you know, and do whatever it takes to make it happen. You know, I've sort of engineered a lifestyle where, you know, I used to landscape because it offered me some mobility and some flexibility with my schedule with touring and also like art deadlines. And then, you know, I fell into doing like bartending for the same reason. And it's not ideal, you know, it's not what I enjoy doing per se, but you know, the grass is always greener. Like I wonder if I had a full-time gig doing art and it wasn't on my terms, if I was like a studio person or whatever, like would I enjoy it as much? I think having a break from it makes me want to do it more when I'm actually at the desk, you know? But I think it is, if it's something that you just like have to do, like don't let anyone persuade you otherwise, and just like keep chiseling away, making connections. Like I think going to gallery shows, you know, speaking to other artists, to like, trying to meet up with art directors. If you are into band artwork, like go to live shows, like talk to the bands if they're at their merch booth, you know, like just try to schmooze as much as you possibly can. And I know it's hard because a lot of artists are not gregarious and they're just kind of shy. But if you can do that, like it'll definitely benefit you, I think. So.
Well, Brendon, I really appreciate it, man. Anybody who's interested in checking out more of his work, follow him on Instagram. He has prints available for sale at the Death Wish store. I'm sure on his Instagram he can also post about anything else that's going on in terms of, galleries or anything that's new for sale. But definitely wish him the best, and I think he's leaving with a lot of good things for everyone to noodle on. But thank you again, everybody. Please like and subscribe if you don't mind. And until next week, appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.